I'm an environmental engineer. Quebec City, 1989. So
Wow.
I have lived in Canada longer than I've lived in India. There, that is considered to be the world's largest environmental cleanup work, remediation work. There is low level radioactive waste that is spread all across town. So, take Ukraine for example. Do you remember a couple of 1.5 years ago, there was this big dam that was breached?
That's right.
Because of some bomb that was there. Now, what happened? I was involved in that project. Right now, as carbon tax, the term carbon tax that is being used in Canada is a misnomer. It's wrongly used.
Okay.
The right term for that is this area is going to melt within 10 years. But they found that some of these areas were melting in 2 years rather than 10 years. So if you take the oil and gas industry, that is being impacted, right,
Okay.
by these carbon pricing, right? And another one probably is the car manufacturing. The European companies are way ahead of us in terms of green technologies. But when the sequels came in, there were people protesting like anything like our vaccine issue 2 years ago. Folks in India or in inland, not coastal, inland, it is getting hotter and hotter, drier and drier, so less and less water available for them. Economic exchange between India and Roman during the Roman Empire. And one season the wind would flow in one direction, so all the ships would go in that way, and the other season or some other time it would come back, right?
Correct. How the carbon taxes
Correct.
pricing are connected to this problem about the production of batteries, industrial settings, they create more emissions or more bad impact in the environment. His father and grandfather used to talk more about rivers, that they will dry out, and now we see that rivers are drying out.
Right.
Hello, namaste. If you have been in Canada for some time, you must have heard about the term carbon taxes. Yes, today we will talk about carbon emissions and carbon taxes. For this, we have Mr. B.R. Ravishankar as our podcast guest, who has done his higher education in IIT Kanpur and now he lives in Canada for almost 35 years. By profession, he is an environmental engineer who has a vast experience of working with federal government, UN, as well as many prestigious institutions. I'm pretty sure after watching this podcast, you will definitely upgrade your knowledge about carbon emissions as well as for the carbon taxes. So without any further delays, let's start this environmental special podcast with Ravi on Chai with Chander. Ravi sir, welcome to Chai with Chander.
Thank you, Chander. This is a great opportunity to meet with you in person as well as have a chat in an area of mutual interest.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much once again for sparing time and coming on weekend driving here at my studio. And it's really pleasure to have you. I'm really excited to talk with you because today we are gonna talk about something which is related to environment, and I studied environment a lot in my graduation and post graduation. Environmental science used to be a subject. I graduated in biotechnology. Yeah, so these days there are many things like which are blurry in this sector. So I'm glad that you are ready to talk on this. So before we jump into the topic, I would like to know a little bit more about you. Like when I see, let's start with your name. I see it's Mr. B.R. Ravishankar.
Correct.
Just tell something about your name first.
In South India, that's where I come from, Mysore, in Karnataka. One of the ways names are given is with the initials of the place where your ancestry is.
Okay.
So stands for Bukankere, which is an ancestral village of mine where my great grandparents were and all that. Since that time, they moved to Mysore.
Okay.
So B stands for that, and R stands for the first letter of my father's name, which is Rajagopal. So it's Bukankare Rajagopal Ravishankar. But when I came here, everybody started insisting on first name and last name. Right.
Correct.
This was before the software standardization started happening.
Correct.
And so then at some point I had the opportunity to decide what is going to be my first name and last name.
Okay.
And I did not want to mess up with the name that was given by my parents.
Correct.
So that's why I made BR as my legal first name and Ravishankar as my legal last name.
Oh,
so
perfect.
that people don't mess with things. And people call me Ravi anyway.
Yeah, I know. And yeah, I would like to call you Ravi as well because it's a big name. Like my name is Chandrasekhar Arya and people just call me Chander. I'm good with that.
Yeah.
So yeah, Ravi.
Exactly. And even my parents call me Ravi. So
oh, that's
it's
good.
not like anybody's...
Yeah, it's a very common name in India.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So it's easy to pronounce as well. Let's talk something about you. Like, what do you do professionally?
I'm an environmental engineer. So you
Nice.
have invited the right person to discuss this. My first degree is in civil engineering, which I studied in Mysore. And then I went on to do my graduate studies at IIT Kanpur and in environmental engineering.
Nice.
And since that time, I continued my graduate studies here in Canada, in Quebec City, actually. And after a few years, then I came over to Ottawa to start my professional life.
Wow. Which year was it when you moved to Quebec?
Quebec City, 1989. So
wow.
I have lived in Canada longer than I've lived in India.
That's a long time. Wow, that's nice. So you studied environmental science here again?
As well, yeah.
Okay. And you moved to Ottawa in which year?
1995, January 1st.
Great. That's interesting. And what's your work now? I mean, what's your area of work right now? Because environment is a big sector, right?
It's a big sector, and I have sort of meandered around, generally speaking. My first 15 years of professional experience was in environmental engineering, different levels of seniority and managerial and all of that. As a project manager, technical guy, air quality and oil spills and everything. And then later on, I joined the federal government as an executive in the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, again looking at the environmental side of the nuclear sector. And then program director, ensuring that all the companies are working well. At one point, I was responsible for the oversight of about 15 Class 1 nuclear facilities in Canada.
Wow.
So, and then I moved on to, not far from here actually, 3 hours away, there's a small town called Port Hope.
Oh, yeah.
And there, that is considered to be the world's largest environmental cleanup work, remediation work. There's low-level radioactive waste that is spread all across town. And so the federal government has provided some funds and they're cleaning it up. And I was there for a couple of years, again as an executive.
Wow, that's nice.
And then I got the opportunity, and in the last 7 years or so, I got the opportunity to be working pretty much full time on United Nations projects, various projects. So I am right now a senior project advisor, basically an expert, international expert going into various countries and providing them advice on different aspects of environmental science and engineering. Right? So it could be oil spills. One of the major projects I worked on is oil spill activity that's still going on, and I'm involved. And there is other ways of helping them reducing the risk of any disaster, whether it's earthquakes or landslides or flooding, or beach erosion. These kinds of things. You know, what can we do to help them resist that kind of situation, reducing the risk and therefore lives and property and all of those things. So that's another element. And then also disaster risk reduction, you know, is the name of the group of activities that we do. But you can see there is engineering, there is science, there is chemistry, there is everything.
What I see is so many interesting words.
Yes.
only in the starting 5 minutes of our talk, like IIT, environmental science, nuclear waste. Then we talk about like UN, then federal government for Canada. So I hope this talk is gonna very interesting further.
I hope so too.
And when we were talking off camera, you were talking about the war zone activities as well, right?
Correct.
So how just a very quick touch on this thing. How do we relate war zones with your work?
Oh, so Ukraine, take Ukraine for example. Do you remember a couple of 1.5 years ago, there was this big dam that was breached
That's right.
because of some bomb that was there? Now, what happened? I was involved in that project where we looked at what is the overall damage because of that dam breach, both upstream and downstream. It's not as obvious as we see in the newspaper, right? And how much does it cost to clean that up, and how much does it cost to repair and bring it back to normal? It's not just putting the dam back, right? There is flooding happening all around, so entire towns are flooded. The industries that were in the town were basically they are all not operating for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, right? Until the flood recedes.
That's right.
That means they have started rusting. They have to be all replaced.
Wow.
We don't think about that, right?
And that all these things go during the war, right?
During the war. Now we can't go there to start working on it. So we do all these estimates. World Bank is currently doing a 6-month once estimate of how much does it cost, and I am involved from the environmental side.
Goodness, I think a separate full podcast can be done on only this topic. This is quite very interesting. It's making me more curious. Well, let's jump onto the topic today. As you know, we are going to talk about carbon tax in Canada. So I'll start directly with, what is carbon tax?
Good question. So right now, as carbon tax, the term carbon tax that is being used in Canada is a misnomer. It's wrongly used.
Okay.
The right term for that is carbon pricing. But I think we need to go a couple of steps back to see why is this so much in the news these days. People talk about climate change, and then all of these things are being done. It is causing a lot of stress to people.
That's right.
Right. So what is climate change? Why is it happening? Why are people interested? Right. So basically, climate change has happened in the past even without human intervention.
That's right.
But the latest one is, some of the activities that are happening is happening in such a speed that the Earth is not capable of absorbing the change at the rate at which it's happening, right? And so there is a lot of pollution happening. There are all kinds of pollution, but there are certain types of pollution which result in heating up the earth. That is the greenhouse effect, as they call it, right? And all these chemicals that are causing this warming pollution, right? These chemicals that are causing pollution that are resulting in warming, they all have this carbon as one of the elements. So the fuels, petrol and all of
So the carbon is the major culprit.
Yeah. So people start using the word carbon, right? But really, it is a set of chemical compounds which are causing pollution that are warming the air, and we cannot sustain that warming beyond a certain point. The Earth cannot handle it, right?
Okay.
So what's the impact of climate? So because of that, there is a change in climate. Now that is happening so fast that it is impacting people, properties, nature, everything. Now let's take this as an example. We know that there is lots and lots of ice in the northern part of Canada, in Antarctica, that have been there for hundreds, thousands of years. Right? Now with the increase in temperature, they start melting. Now where does all that water go? It ends up in the ocean.
100%.
Now, which means that the mean sea level that is there, that we know of, that based on which people have built houses in the coastal areas, all of those things, right? Based on, okay, the ocean comes up to here, so I can build the house a little up and up the road, and therefore there's no issues. I can enjoy my beach, right? But suddenly, if water level increases, then the flooding happens more and more.
Correct.
And goes and damages properties that have been built at the and wherever there is larger coastal areas, so take islands for example, right? They can actually have severe impact, that to the point where the land is lost because of water. Water's rising ocean levels means rising water, which means it is coming into the land which was open before, right? Now, what happens to all the people who are in the area where they're losing land? They will go somewhere else. Where will they go? Either within the country or they will go outside the country.
Correct.
So what is the end result of that? Increased refugees status, right? You get that? So increased refugees. Who are the countries which are in the process of receiving refugees?
Canada.
Everyone, right?
Wow.
Europe,
What a
Canada.
angle.
So that's the link. That is also one of the reasons why Canada is interested in making sure that things are okay in those areas, so that they can stem. That's the longer term. But the other thing that is happening inside in Canada is when the ice melts in northern part of Canada, right? They trap organic material underneath, and that gets exposed.
Correct.
They start. You're a biotechnology guy, so you know decomposition.
Yeah.
Two kinds: aerobic, anaerobic.
Correct.
And when there is anaerobic decomposition, hydrogen sulfide
Again,
is, and that is thermal. It gives off heat.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So basically, what's happening is when that particular area becomes hotter, warmer,
Correct.
right?
Correct.
Because of decomposition, that is going to result in even more ice warming. So it is a chain reaction that is irreversible.
Wow. Loving it.
So when that happens, this is a unstoppable problem. In fact, models have shown that they were guessing, they were forecasting that this area is going to melt within 10 years. But they found that some of these areas were melting in 2 years rather than 10 years. So the forecasting was also too slow. Something is happening.
It's alarming.
Alarming indeed. So, but there are people who claim that, global warming means cold countries like Canada is going to be warmer, right? It's going to be nice. But that's also not true, because what we are seeing is colder weathers like winters are becoming even colder.
Okay.
And warmer weathers are becoming warmer. So summertime, we used to get like 35, 33, 34 degrees Celsius, right? In some peak summer.
Okay.
Now it's going closer to 37, 38.
Yeah.
Right? And the same thing happens the other way.
So that's a nice explanation. I mean, even I did not think about, like dots are gonna, match like this. So this is a great point of view. Now, as we understand, like what is global warming and how the things are impacting, especially to Canada as well. So how the carbon taxes or pricing are connected to this problem.
So we understand now the impact of climate change. So which means all countries have to do something about it.
Correct.
If we don't do, and if we kind of point fingers at others, then we are not doing anything. Then as a global community, we cannot do something. And Canada is also a country which has the resources. And so we have to do something about it, right? And I also told you how doing things are going to benefit Canada in the longer run by stemming refugees, right? So Canada has to do something. Now, other countries also have to do something. There are different ways of trying to stem things, to control the advancement of global warming, right? The increase in temperature. So we have to basically try and reduce the polluting chemicals, the carbon emissions, as we talk about, right? So we have to reduce that. That's one way. We have to try and reduce the consumption of energy. Okay, that will help. There is another area we can try and focus, improve the infrastructure of areas where there could be a damage.
Okay.
Right? All of these various things are there. So, going into electric vehicles as opposed to
Yeah.
petroleum using vehicles, right? That's just one example.
Yeah.
Using nuclear or hydroelectric power to generate electricity compared to using natural gas
As alternative
or
methods.
alternative methods, right? But it's a continuum. It's not like one day you stop everything and another day the next day you start with your windmill. Or whatnot.
Makes sense. Yeah.
It's a whole a gradual process, but it needs to happen, right?
Yep.
So what do governments do who are serious to tackle this, right? Within their own jurisdictions? What they do, they recognize that it is a gradual thing. But if there is no incentive for people to change is harder, right? We know that with recycling, right? If there is no incentive if there is no regulation that said from now on we are all going to do composting and whatnot, right? People wouldn't do that. Maybe some would do, some others would ignore, right? Same way with the companies which are emitting emissions, these carbon emissions, right? There is an incentive. Now, how could you give them an incentive? You can give them money. That is also one way, and there are programs that way. But there is another way, which is carbon pricing, which is basically saying you have got these carbon emissions, reduce it, but until such time, we are going to ask you to pay a certain amount of money to the government. Okay. Now, there is a difference between that and a tax, carbon tax. Okay. That's why I said it's a misnomer. The money that is coming in from these companies into the government, what the current policy says is that we will give that money back to the people.
So the federal government is not keeping that money.
Correct.
They are distributing it to the people.
Yes, it is revenue neutral. Okay, there's no profit coming into the government.
So what I understand is they are taking money who is making bad impact of environment.
Correct.
And then distributing it to the general public.
Correct. And this concept is not new. We do that all the time. And somebody has got an industrial process, like paper manufacturing or whatever. I'm talking not today, but going back several decades. Right? They had air emissions. We had permitting fee. We gave them all kinds of incentives as well as licensing requirements. Right? They have to do a bunch of things in order to ensure they reduce the emissions and all of that. That has always been there. Control of pollution. I mean, even in India, that's why we have pollution control boards. Right?
Okay.
Control of pollution is a well-known factor.
Okay.
But here it is focused only on, we are talking about carbon
pricing and tax. Okay. So I have another question on here. You talked about this is a kind of a penalty to the businesses who are producing or emitting bad gases in the environment, right? But on the another side, people are also doing it. So is there any segments or is there any products or services which are identified by government that we are starting this carbon taxing or carbon pricing to the certain segment of businesses or certain sectors?
There is, but I have to look into the specifics in terms of what the cutoff is.
Okay.
But there are certain segments that they're focusing on.
Okay.
Right?
So all the businesses are not getting impacted by this thing, is it?
No. There is. I do have to look at the specifics in terms of what the cutoff is. But for example, the easy one to discuss is the.
Okay, I'll rephrase it, I guess. What I am trying to ask is, do all categories of business, not in terms of how much revenue they are generating or how big business is, what I'm talking about the sectors, where do government put these carbon taxes? Is it for the products like gasoline or fossil fuels, all these kind of products, or everything?
So fossil fuels, yes.
Okay.
Take fossil fuels. Now it's at the production level, right? So that is where the emission. We will have to look into specifics. Sure. I can give you those details later on offline. So if you take the oil and gas industry, that is being impacted. right?
Okay,
By
okay.
these carbon pricing,
Hmm.
right? And another one probably is the car manufacturing, right? And
So which are direct?
forestry.
Okay.
Forestry is another one that I can think of, right?
So,
So basically, each one there is a balance, right?
Yeah,
And they say, oh look, we are doing all of these things which are beneficial for the environment, so that reduces their quote unquote penalty,
yeah, good.
right? And in other places, they say, for example, forestry, they say, hey, I've got all these forests so that I'm replanting, and that is causing carbon capture, which is a good thing, right? And therefore, that is beneficial,
Yeah,
right?
because why I'm asking this is right now you will see people are divided into two groups. One group is in the favor of these carbon pricing or taxes, and one is opposing. They are doing protests and everything. So I want to understand why people are so loud against this. Is it impacting everybody, like average Canadian, or is just like big businesses are impacted right now?
Okay. So again, there's a split answer to it. It is impacting everybody from the carbon pricing, from the penalty side of things, but it is not impacting. It is being beneficial because this is a
giving back.
carbon neutral, revenue neutral system.
yeah.
So which means they are getting carbon rebates once every 3 months, right? So when you take all of it together, it is said, according to the Canadian Parliamentary Budget Officer, that over 80% of Canadians are coming out net positive from this thing. Because when a company has a penalty, if you will, or carbon pricing, they have to pay into the carbon pricing. They obviously transfer that cost, increased cost to people.
Now I understand. So
Right?
this is related to the cost of living
Cost of
ultimately.
living, yes,
Okay.
exactly.
Okay.
So that's what's happening. Now, carbon pricing, I told you, unlike a carbon tax is if the government says, because you're doing this, give me so much tax, and that's the end of it. So government keeps the money, right? That is tax. There's no incentive for them to either stop it or whatever. There's no incentive for them to improve.
Correct.
Right? Whereas now, if it is carbon pricing, the company has got the opportunity to try and innovate. Right? When they innovate and reduce the emissions, they pay less money into this. So there is an incentive for them to continue to innovate their operations. And it's not just big industries or airline industry or whatever, right? Even small things. And there is another element of cap and trade system. There's another part of carbon pricing, okay, which we don't have. We were thinking of having it 20 years ago, and then government changed and the policy changed. Right?
Okay.
The carbon trading is very, very interesting. So let's take one industry which has got a lot of emissions, another industry which is doing really well, and it has lower than what they are allowed to produce.
So you are talking about carbon credits.
Yes, carbon
Okay,
credit.
okay.
It's called carbon trading. So
Okay.
these people have got positive credits.
Yeah,
These
they can
guys
sell it.
need another credit, right? They need more credits.
Wow.
So they purchase it from these guys.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So this kind of system exists, I believe, in California.
Yeah,
Ontario
yeah.
was supposed to have it, but then
There are
governments
some
changed.
online portals where you sell your carbon credits
Correct,
and you get
exactly.
money about that.
Exactly.
And there is very interesting thing in carbon credits. I mean, I'm not the expert. As I said, I'm always curious, so I just Google things and talk to people. So this carbon credit is something like, if I have big land, acres of land standing there, if I grow forest there, so I'm putting, and I register it as some organization, right? So I'm putting positive impact of environment, so I will be accumulating positive carbon credits, and I can sell on these websites. That's quite interesting.
So now, how does anybody? This is a side information about myself. How does anybody know how much of carbon credits these people have to sell? Right, because there's money in it. One has to be really careful in terms of evaluating how many credits they have. Right. So you need auditors for that. Right, greenhouse gas auditors, credit auditors, and ISO 14064 is one of the standards for that, for validation and verification. I was one of the first 25 people across Canada to be certified to be a validator and verifier.
Wow, that's nice.
This was 20 years ago.
Okay.
And of course, again, the policy changed. We never got the carbon credit system rolling in Canada, and so that was.
So if this thing happen in Canada in future, so you are the person.
I'll have to refresh my skill bit a little bit because it's a little old. But yeah, you're absolutely right. So that's very important. Okay, so in carbon pricing, you could do that. So let me give that very simple example that you have seen around you. You have school buses, right? And there is an organization that has a fleet of school buses, and they serve all these various school boards, right? Now, let's say the innovation that they make is to their carburetor or the engine to reduce the emission by a few percentage points, right? In each of these buses in their fleet. Now, if they have 400 buses and they put it all together, small innovation in each bus will mean that they have reduced their carbon emissions by so many credits, right? They can just turn around and sell it to somebody. So that's an innovation that you will never hear in the news media because everybody talks about the big industries. But these are small innovations. So innovation can happen in any different direction. Even better road asphalt systems, anything that improves the situation, which reduces carbon emissions, can be beneficial. So carbon pricing per se is not just carbon tax, as you know.
What do you see? How long has been here carbon taxes in Canada?
Carbon tax, again, I would refrain from using carbon tax because it's not
pricing. It's been a few years now, right?
A few since the current government came in.
Oh, okay, great.
So close to 9 years. Yeah.
So my question is, what do you think? Is it benefiting Canada in any way? Is it
Definitely, it is changing the habits. This is about providing incentive for people to change habits. Right? When I say people, I'm talking about companies, organizations. They're changing their habits. In fact, some of the larger organizations, mining companies, oil companies, and all, they're not waiting for these regulations and incentives. They can see how things are changing in the world because they are competing against some international organizations, right? In Europe. So they have to compete. And those guys are way ahead of us. The European companies are way ahead of us in terms of green technologies. So these people are changing to respond to market forces.
Okay. Do we have any success stories globally apart from Canada where the carbon pricing happened and it's successful?
Yes. I can speak in generalities right now. I don't have specifics, but there are many oil companies in Europe who have also invested in the generation of electricity, in generation of energy through the windmills, right? Wind energy. Yeah. And then they are investing in small modular reactors, SMRs, for the nuclear sector. So that's there. That's coming up. Germany, which had gotten out of nuclear, is now thinking about going back to nuclear. Okay. So there are different ways. There are different companies, different organizations. They're either innovating within their existing technology or coming up with alternate technology. Now we have to be careful, as I said. Everybody claims green technology. What is called greenwashing, right? People say, "Oh, yeah, we are doing this X, Y, and Z," right? But it will have to be verified to ensure that it is.
Yeah, that's correct. In Canada, people are talking loud about these carbon taxes. Protests are going on the streets and in front of Parliament as well. Opposition party talks a lot about this.
Correct.
Why?
It's political. It's a wedge. Right? Because if you talk about carbon pricing and carbon rebates, which government wants to do, then it is about, hey, it's not affecting you, right? That's what they want to pass. Yeah. The opposition party wants to say what? These people are increasing the cost of production of X, Y, and Z. And that is these companies which are producing these things are transferring all of that additional cost onto the poor consumers. And therefore consumers are paying more money to per liter of gas or for home heating oil or whatever, right? So they focus on the increased cost of these products, but they are not talking about the rebates that are coming in. Government wants to focus on, hey, we are revenue neutral. This is the money is coming back to you, therefore. So personally, from as an environmental engineer who is aware of these things, I believe what the approach that the current government is doing, but that's not the only one. There are multiple ways climate change can be attacked, right? And this is just one of them. So it's carbon tax wise. Why is it controversial right now? Because of ideology and political needs rather than technical thing. I'm not a political guy, so I'm just pointing out these things, the difference.
So you think it's kind of they're trying to create a fear game, or they're playing fear game in the public?
Absolutely. Because, for example, I told you that 20 years ago there was almost 2005 December was they were ready to come out with a publication of the carbon credit system. Okay. This is Paul Martin government, and then the election was called, and Mr. Harper got elected, and his manifesto, the party manifesto, said we are not going to touch climate change because they don't believe in it, or they thought it was too much of a hardship for organizations here, companies, oil companies, and all that. So they decided to just basically leave that alone, right? So the entire file that I had been working on for a couple of years before that, everything sort of suddenly stopped, right?
So that's why
it's political. I mean, you can't blame it. I mean, they won fair and square, and they came into government, and they had a different priority.
So this thing has a history. That's why they are calling it carbon tax election, right?
Correct. That's why they want to make it carbon tax election, but they don't want to talk about rebates. I'm talking the opposition party, and the ruling party is pushing for focusing on the rebates part of it and doing a whole bunch of other things in addition. They have all kinds of incentives, money put in for additional innovation or this or that. But in the din of political discussions that are going on, most of the other things are not being discussed that much, except for some people in the Ottawa bubble.
Okay. I just want to have your personal view on a question. I'll not say the question is just like, I just want to know your view. There are two things. Government is putting taxes, carbon pricing on the businesses, and people are getting rebate. Two things, right? So the opposition is saying the cost of living is getting increased because of these carbon taxes. But the federal government is going, we are paying you back to balance this cost of living. Do you think it's a balanced figure?
Yeah, according to, obviously,
just your view. I'm not.
No. I mean, whatever view I have has to be based on something factual.
Correct.
Right? Otherwise, it's just pie in the sky. So if I read the articles that are coming out, the discussions that are happening related to the announcement by the parliamentary budget officer, who is supposed to be neutral, they have looked at all of this, and they have of late, there was one publication that came in April, and then they recently came up again with an update on that just a few weeks ago. And what they're saying is, yes, over 80% of Canadians are net beneficiaries of this carbon rebate system because it's revenue neutral. Not only that, what government has done is, supposing they collect X amount of money from the Alberta province, that money is given back to Albertans. And if some amount of money is coming from Ontario, that money is coming back to Ontarians. And same thing with British Columbia or Manitoba or New Brunswick or Quebec.
So it's the kind of, looks like a fair system.
Yes. That, as much as I can tell, right? It looks like a fair system. Now they may say, what about the remaining 20%? I don't know. That's
Okay. So here you work for UN as well. You mentioned, right?
yeah, correct.
And when you said that when government changed in 2005 and they put these carbon things on the back burner, right?
Yes.
So what I understand is, isn't it the target given by UN to all the countries globally to reduce these things?
No. How that UN is an entity which has no power directly to impose anything unless its members gives them the power.
Okay, yeah,
Right?
makes sense.
So they can't just go in and say you shall do this or that. Their members have to, the Security Council or the other committees and other groups. They come up with something they all agree on, and they then say, UN, you shall be given this mandate for you to go and do something, and go and talk to people about various mandates. Right? So same way, UN directly doesn't have that mandate. In around early 90s, under a UN convention, there was a broad agreement among member states. All the countries are called member states in the UN jargon. And they all agreed on something. And again, 1997, they came together in Japan, in Kyoto, and agreed on something, right? And all countries, and they also agreed on richer countries like Canada, US. They said, okay, we understand that poor countries don't have the money to handle these things, and also it is unfair. The other countries kept saying it's unfair. You enjoyed the benefits of development, and you screwed up. You put all kinds of pollution in the air, and now we are suffering from it. So it's not fair. So that's how all these richer countries developed countries decided to pay them money in order to help them, in order to arrive and do something with their climate change, climate action, as they say, right? So that happened that was supposed to come into effect in 2005. I believe Canada in 2012 said we are formally getting out of Kyoto Agreement. So but world has moved on since that time. There are countries which are implementing climate action. There are countries which are refusing to implement climate action. India is one of the signatories too.
Yeah.
And, they have done quite a few things actually.
Yeah, and they are doing it, and things are moving in the right direction.
Correct.
Great. Okay, so you also mentioned that this is not the only thing, carbon pricing, that government can do. There are many more things. What are the more things?
For example, we have a department called Natural Resources Canada, right? They have programs incentivizing, focusing, providing money for new startups, for newer innovative technologies.
In sustainability.
In different sectors. Okay. It could be agriculture, as you mentioned, right? The land.
That's right.
It could be agriculture, it could be forestry, it could be oil industry, it could be a whole bunch of things. Energy sector, right? There are many different incentives that they have.
Okay.
And then there is also our National Research Council. Remember, there is another department there.
That's right.
And what do? They provide seed funding for new research.
Okay.
For a whole bunch of things, right? All kinds of, whether it's pure science, whether it's medical science, and all of that. If universities come and submit a proposal, they examine that and provide that. So those things, the innovative technologies and scientific development in the area that will help climate change has also got earmarked funding that the government has done. So those are just in terms of incentives and all that. Then there is the other element, which is to improve the knowledge of the general public. This is called public education, right? So public awareness campaign, right? And that's how we got seatbelts. That's how we got recycling.
That's right.
So every single new idea sees resistance, but over time and over generations, people Today,
Okay.
you hardly see anybody resisting seatbelts
Yeah, yeah.
or
It's in the
Medicare.
habit.
Yeah, but when the seatbelts came in, there were people protesting like anything, like our vaccine issue 2 years ago. Same way, there were lots of people who were protesting.
Okay.
But things changed, right?
Yeah,
So
that's
same
right.
thing. There is a public awareness program also that's happening, and federal government, what it does, because not everything is under their jurisdiction, right? Some of it is in a provincial jurisdiction, others are in municipal jurisdiction.
Yeah.
So they go and talk to provinces and say, okay, we shall give you this much amount of money for a program that you can start, right?
Okay.
On
Okay.
this area.
Okay. From your talk, what I sense is that this carbon pricing step is a positive step and moving toward, in a good way, in a positive way. So, do you think in coming years these taxes are evolving?
It should evolve for several reasons. One is, again, carbon pricing as opposed to carbon tax, right? Carbon pricing will also mature because assuming that these companies are innovating and improving and reducing their emissions, right? Then their penalty that they're paying the federal government is also going to reduce. Am I right? That's one. The second thing is that general public is more aware of these things. Therefore, the resistance also should reduce. All of this assuming that the current policy will continue. But if there is an election and a new government comes with a different set of priorities,
Okay.
then this may completely stop. And you may no longer have the carbon tax component of the carbon pricing, but we will also no longer have the rebate part of it.
Oh, okay, okay. That's interesting. I mean, lots of things because from a layman perspective, the narrative is going really loud, and people are, right now there is a thing going against Liberal Party for many things, and this thing is adding up
Correct.
in that narrative, right? So this is good to know few facts about this. But now my question is for the average Canadian. How do you think small businesses or an average Canadian can mitigate the impact of these carbon pricing or carbon taxes? Is there some ways, like good ways?
Okay. I'll give you two parts. One is my personal view is that individual actions in the bigger scheme of things, unless it reaches a critical mass,
Correct.
individual actions are less effective. Unless it reaches a critical mass. Like everybody is doing recycling right now. Right? Go back to that. Then it has a benefit. If I do it, but 10 other people around me decide not to do it, then it has no impact. So how do we overcome that? So I'm a firm believer that in order to help the individuals do something beneficial, right? It is better for the government or organizations to facilitate that, right?
Okay.
So similar to the recycling part where there is a law in place that everything has to be recycled, right? That's how we have a recycling program. Same way, if we have incentives and regulations in place to reduce emissions, that's where all of these activities are going on. What can we do as individuals? Like, I bought a hybrid car
Okay.
because I felt that that was my way of reducing emissions.
Great.
Now, I could have gone full EV, electric vehicle, but the infrastructure right now for electric vehicles, I feel, there are other people who don't feel that way, but I feel that the infrastructure is not still common enough that that I would jump onto EV right now.
Okay.
But maybe in a couple of years,
Yeah, sure.
things will improve. So that's also another way of governments doing, municipalities installing lots of charging stations around with easy access to people.
Yeah.
That is going to really help.
I'll take a sub question here. People also debate about the production of batteries, industrial settings. They create more emissions or more bad impact in the environment. So how do you see that?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
So any new technology that comes is in a growth phase, and they are focusing on certain things, but the downside of it also exists, right? But then when you get to that point where, like, if it is battery technology, then it is about I mean, if you take electronic waste, there is all kinds of metals that, even precious metals, that are lost, and it just goes and it's being wasted, and it's going into landfills, right? So there is a downside of to environmental downside in these new technologies. So then there is the innovation should continue to try and reduce, because there is an economic impetus for these companies to reduce environmental impact.
Okay, that sounds
So
good.
there is a problem. Battery issues continue, and in fact, battery issues continue both ways, right? One is how big a battery can you have that can last 8 hours, 10 hours, 20 hours, whatever, right?
Yeah, because I was looking on a short video, a couple of days ago. There is a treadmill, right? Everyone use in the gym or at home. The treadmill, right? That's electronic. Either that use battery or some AC power, right?
It uses
AC power.
The one
right?
which I use at home is
It's AC power.
AC
Okay, okay. So there is a carpenter in India who made it with the woods, small pieces of woods, and it doesn't need any kind of external energy to make it work.
Yeah.
So now I'm coming from that point to our car and battery point. Do you think sometime some technology is growing in the growing phase, and suddenly we get an alternative of that
Yes.
thing? So do you think it can happen in the battery segment of automobile to the hydrogen or something?
Correct,
Yeah?
correct. I was about to mention that. That can happen. That can easily happen. You mentioned that self-mobile treadmill, right?
I don't know the correct name, but this is something.
I also don't know. Those are nice jugards and technologies that are existing, but there is a challenge. The challenge that they may face, otherwise by now it would have been done, is having an idea, a concept into something that actually works is one thing, but taking that and scaling it up to major production so that you can actually sell it everywhere is a different matter.
Correct.
Like, for example, talk about lawn mowing, right? I used to have this gasoline powered two-stroke
Got it.
engine. Now I moved into a battery operated system. So that is my personal way of dealing with it. But the there is Lee Valley Tools here in Ottawa. They make a hand pushing.
Yeah, it's a mechanical stuff.
Mechanical one.
Yeah.
They have, I mean, that's a fantastic product, by the way.
And that debris goes into the soil to make it composite, right?
Correct. And so basically, it exists, and they have scaled it up.
Correct.
But still, if it's a large lawn in many homes, it is too much. They can't use it, right?
That's
so there are limitations for new technologies, but that continues, and that is true for any new technology, right? And by that time, a new battery comes. Maybe there is a newer technology like hydrogen fuel cell that you mentioned. Maybe that becomes commercial enough. Right? And that technology exists, but it has not become commercial enough yet, because there is something that is going on there that the manufacturers are feeling it's not ready yet. Right?
Okay, great. So time is flying, sir. We are almost near to 50 minutes or 55 minutes.
Really?
Yeah. So I would like to go into the last section. I mean, I just like to end it with a very generic question. Let's assume someone is skeptical about this carbon taxes or something, right? Any average citizen, Canadian citizen, what would be your piece of advice to them?
Good, very, very good question, especially to end it. I would say to anyone, you should stop thinking about yourself. and think about your children and grandchildren. Now, think about it. Somebody in Canada may think that, oh, I don't believe in all of these things. It's important for me to have a house that is affordable, etc., 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 right? But if the situation becomes dire, like what happened in Jasper or in Lillooet or Lytton in British Columbia last 2 years, if the entire area catches flames, then you are you and the bird are in the same boat, which is basically you have to run away from that place, right? So things are getting worse and worse when it comes to climate change, and folks in India or in the inland, not coastal, inland, it is getting hotter and hotter, drier and drier, so less and less water available for them. It becomes more arid. And in the coastal areas, I talked about flooding. What will happen to your hometown and your ancestral home for your grandchildren?
Correct.
If you keep on saying, I don't believe in climate change, or I don't believe in doing anything related, I believe in climate change, but I don't want to do anything, I don't want to sacrifice anything now, then how is that going to impact 2-3 generations down the road?
Correct.
Right?
I can totally correlate. When my father used to tell me, like his father and grandfather used to talk more about rivers, that they will dry out. And now we see that rivers are drying out.
Correct.
Yeah.
Exactly. And one of the great things about our ancestors is that they were clued into nature much more than we are.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
So they knew the seasonal variation, what would happen this way. Even economies were based on that. Even businesses were based on that. You read recent. You may have heard about this. There was huge economic exchange between India and Roman during the Roman Empire. And one season the wind would flow in one direction, so all the ships would go in that way, and the other season at some other time it would come back.
Correct.
So
smart.
They would use the nature to their advantage. Right? Today we can sit inside here and inside a building with AC and all that and not be affected by outside temperatures, right? And there are cities and towns. Take Phoenix as an example. Phoenix in Arizona as an example. Today they say that Phoenix could not exist the way it exists right now without the invention of air conditioning. So many things are possible through innovation. But at the same time, we also have to do something in order to continue to survive as a species.
Yeah, that's correct. It's a lovely message, sir. So from my side, this was today's podcast. How was it? Did you like it?
Fantastic. I didn't even realize that it went this long and whatnot. So I should thank you very much for making this so interesting and keeping and inviting me to discuss a topic that is close to my heart.
Yeah, that's great, sir.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I really loved this talk and looking forward to the another podcast on that war zone activities.
Absolutely.
Once again, thank you so much, and we'll see you again.
I'll be happy to come back, and I wish you all the best for this podcast. I know you have just started the English one, so I look forward to watching a lot more.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So guys, this was a super informative session with Ravi sir. I completely loved the talk because my thoughts were not connecting before this talk, and now it makes sense to me, many things. If you are at this point in the podcast, it means you liked it. Then grab your thumb and like the podcast and share it with the people who want to understand the carbon taxes in Canada. I want you to help me to disseminate this information to every average Canadian, because we are not the political puppets. We have our own brain. We want environment to sustain for our next generations as well. So yeah, I don't want to make it more philosophical, and with my all these talks, I will end this podcast. Until then, take care, and we'll see you in the next podcast. Thank you so much.